Lately, a lot of people have been asking me what I think of universal background checks, mainly because a lot of them know I live in the state of Washington. The state of Washington was one of the first states targeted by Bloomberg to institute universal background checks for gun sales, and then the next state was Oregon right below me. Now, my stance on universal background checks is something I've made clear already. That's one of the reasons I haven't made a video yet, because I've already stated multiple times what I think of universal background checks and why I don't think they're a good idea. I'll post a little link down here in the corner. You can click on that and you can go see what I actually think of universal background checks as a concept. Even though I am staunchly opposed to universal background checks, I'm trying to be an optimist. I'm trying to see the silver lining here. Now, I'm not usually a complete optimist. Some people see the glass as half full, some people see the glass as half empty. I usually see the glass as a reminder that we're living alone in a hell of our own creating while slowly careening towards the cold, dark oblivion of death. But in this case, I'm trying to see the silver lining. One of the things that the U.S. government misuses the most to control gun sales and gun ownership in this country is the Interstate Commerce Clause. They use it for all kinds of things related to guns. The main source of this power came to them in 1968 when they passed the 1968 Handgun Control Act, and that was basically a knee-jerk reaction to the assassinations of Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And even though that's what they were reacting to, they did absolutely nothing that would have stopped those assassinations. It just happens one of the guns was bought mail order, so they said, well, we'll ban mail order, and that led to the whole interstate commerce thing. That's what made it to where only FFLs can transfer between each other across state lines. Individuals can't transfer across state lines. And there were reasons for it at the time. If you were a bad guy in Texas and you had a criminal record in Texas and you went up to Tennessee to buy a gun, well, they had no way of knowing you were a bad guy in Texas. And they especially had no way of knowing if you lived in Texas and committed a crime in, say, Arkansas. They weren't connected. We didn't have computer systems like we have now, so they had no way to check. So they limited gun sales to your state where you live, where they will hopefully have the records of whether you're a good guy or a bad guy. Well, that might have been the case in 1968, but it's not the case today. Today, we are connected by a network of computer systems. We have a national background check. Everyone can see everything about you from anywhere in the Union. So that's not the case anymore. But when you bring up that that's not the case anymore, people will still use things like, well, yeah, but in some states, you can just walk up to an individual and buy a gun with no background check whatsoever. So we don't want someone from our state going to that state and doing that. Well, even though I'm someone that thinks private sales account for almost no crime, I can still say, well, if that's what you think, though, if that's what you feel, that's your argument. Well, if you get what you want and you have universal background checks, that's no longer an argument for you. You cannot justify this interstate commerce control over that any longer. If every single person that has to buy a handgun has to go through the same background check in every single state, and every single state has access to all the records everywhere, then there's no more reason for the interstate commerce control of handgun sales. If the federal government is sanctioning these background checks and approving these background checks in every state with a uniform measure, then there's no reason to discriminate from state to state any longer. Now, a lot of people are going to say, what about the financial aspects of it? What about a state's right to collect sales taxes, etc., to regulate the business through those means? Well, every state has a right to be as competitive or as non-competitive with the state next to them as they want to be regarding taxes, etc. What they don't have the right to do is restrict my access as a citizen to cross borders and conduct business. And if there's a uniform principle, a uniform practice to buying a handgun, then they have no right to restrict that now. It's like driver's licenses, marriage licenses, etc. It's something that I should be able to do state to state. Now, if the state wants to collect sales taxes, that'll be up to them to figure a way to do it. That's why I think Washington went along with universal background checks, because they want to collect sales taxes on private sales. It's like if I go across the border and buy a car, the state cannot tell me I can't go across the border and buy a car, but they can require me to pay sales taxes on that car in my state when I register it in my state. So some people will say, well, that'll cause them to create a gun registry. Well, I think we should force that argument, because the courts right now have not been sympathetic to that idea. So if we forced that argument, I think they would lose that argument. So sometimes it's good to force an argument, especially if it's an argument they're going to lose. Now, you might live in a state that doesn't allow certain things, but that's true of all states. If I live in a state that doesn't allow a certain item, I can't go to another state and buy it and bring it back. I can still go to that state and buy it, just can't bring it back. So that would be true of guns too. You can go somewhere and buy something, but you would commit a crime if you took it to a state that doesn't allow that item. But if I live in Washington and I want to go across the river to Oregon, where there's still gun shops, there's no gun shops in my area anymore really. If I want to go across there and buy a gun, I should be able to go over there, prove who I am, do the background check, pick up the gun. And then when I pick that gun up in Oregon, I should just be able to bring it back to Washington with me. If I go on vacation to Ohio, and I don't know why I'd go on vacation to Ohio, maybe I want to see the world's largest chewing gum wall. But if I'm there on vacation and I see a great deal on a gun and I want to buy it, I should be able to do the background check, prove who I am, buy the gun, put it in my luggage on the airplane or drive it home with me and just take it home. I am a U.S. citizen that can legally own a handgun inside the continental United States that just passed a universal background check and proved all those facts, so I should be able to buy my gun no matter where I'm at inside the United States. And yes, I can see where you can still ban internet direct sales and mail order direct sales because those people didn't really prove who they were. They never made face-to-face contact with the FFL. Anything can be falsified over the internet or through the mail. But if I'm there in person, it shouldn't matter where I'm at in the country as long as I am a citizen of this country and I go through the background check. So next time you have an argument with someone that wants universal background checks, don't argue with them about the background checks. Just say, okay, if you get your way and we get universal background checks, would you be okay with me as a citizen of Texas driving up to Idaho and buying a gun and just taking it home? I'm passing the same background check that I would in Texas, and I'm a citizen of the United States, and these are federal laws, so would you be okay with that? And you know, if their goal is just to keep guns out of the hands of bad guys, people that can't legally own them, they should be fine with that because you can legally own a gun and every state can check that easily, especially with a uniform platform, a uniform background check. So if you present them this information and they still support interstate commerce control, if they still say the federal government should be able to regulate across state lines the sales of handguns, well then it's pretty obvious that their goal isn't to keep handguns out of bad guys' hands, it's to keep them out of everyone's hands. You ain't even my real dad.